Shalom everyone and welcome to Busisiwe, which is Barak in Hebrew. We continue. My name is Abigail. My daughter made me laugh because I was looking at a smiley face. My name is Abigail. I didn't even introduce myself. As we continuing on the appointed times of YaHUaH, specifically looking at the times or when are we to observe and what is that guides us in terms of the appointed times of YaHUaH. Is it the sun? Is it the moon? And what happens when there's a difference in terms of the number of days? I said it in the previous teaching that in a year, the moon has 254 days, whereas the sun has 364 days. But it ultimately there needs to be a reconciliation between the two. So how do we account for the 10 days short per annum that we have if we are monitoring or you having our calendar using the moon? Specifically, as I said, for the appointed times, we are instructed by YaHUaH to use the moon, not the sun. The book of, as I said, the only person according to YaHUaH's prerogative, he chose that it is ENOCH that he is revealing this truth to concerning the movement of the lights which he created on day 4, being the moon, the sun, as well as the stars. CHaNuK or ENOCH chapter 78 verse 10 to 11, it reads, "On stated months, the moon has 29 days and once 28 days. So which we know that the sun either has 30 days or 31 days, but the moon has 29 or once 28 days. Hence, coming to this 10 days short using the moon on an annual basis." Continuing on chapter 78 verse 19, it reads, "For 3 months its effects in 30 days its period, and for 3 months its effects in 29 days each, in which its effects its decrease in its first period and the first gate, which comes to then 177 days." Now, 177 days per period, or you could look at it as 177 days in 6 months. So if you take 177 days, multiply by 2, which means like 6 times 2 is 12, or basically 2 periods, 1 period and the other period, you then get to 354. Hence, I mentioned that the movement of the number of days according to the moon's counting, you get 354, which is 10 days less than the sun, as I said, which is 364 days. The book of, same book of CHaNuK. Now, if you go to the next chapter, which is chapter 79, from 3 to 4, and then it reads, "From this is the beginning of the month, and it decreases, and its decrease is effected in the 6th gate in its period until 177 days are completed, according to the mode of calculation by weeks, 27 days. It is less than of the sun, according to the ordinance of the stars, by 5 days per period," or 5 days per period, or can look at it as 5 days roughly within 6 months. Hence, then 5 times 2, which is like we said before, 6 times 2 is 12 months. So for the whole 12-month period, or for the whole year, then you then come to 5 times 2, which is 10. Hence the 10 days short that is brought about by the moon as compared to the sun in one time precisely. Right. ENOCH 74 from verse 13 to 16, I constantly say it is really an injustice for anyone that says ENOCH is unscriptural. Because anyone that says ENOCH is unscriptural, then how are you going to obey YaHUaH's appointed times that are listed in the books that we have access to, which is the book of Shemot or Exodus, the book of Devarim or Deuteronomy, the book of Luim or Leviticus? How are you going to do that if you don't know the when part? Because the when is provided in detail in the book of ENOCH. No else it is provided. No other book provides these details. Hence I say it is really unfortunate situation that people lied to us and said that we don't need them, that it's not scriptural. But then now that you know the truth, it is then up to you to say, are you going to still believe the lie and follow the lie when the truth has already been put before us? Then it is, you can't blame the other people that deceived us initially, then when you already have the truth and you still choose to follow what they said to you and not search the scriptures for yourself and obey Yahweh's commandment in that which has already been provided through his servant Enoch, or actually his name is CHaNuK. Enoch chapter 74 verse 13 to 16, it reads, it reads, the moon brings on all the years exactly that their stations may come neither too forward nor too backwards a single day, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. So remember today's teaching, we're looking at how then do you reconcile the 10 days per annum that is short when you're using the moon as compared to using the sun, because the sun has 364 days and then the moon has 354 days. The book of Enoch chapter 74 from verse 13 to 16, it tells us that the years may be changed with correct precision. May be changed with correct precision. So this is now allowing us to then do this alignment to reconcile the two. So this reconciliation of the 10 days per year, it didn't just come to anyone's head, or we're not just doing it because so and so said so, but we see the permission being given from the book of Enoch 74 from verse 13 to 16, that the years may be changed with correct precision. And then it continues then to read, in 3 years the days are 1092. So the days of the moon are 1092. How do you get to the 1092? In 3 years, it's literally 354 times 3, because in 3 years per year, remember, it is 354. And then in 5 years, the days are 1820. Again, 354 times 5. So in 5 years, 1820. And then in 8 years, 2912 days. Again, it's 354 times 8 equals 2912. This is written in the book of Enoch, chapter 74, from verse 13 to 16. To the moon, this is to the moon alone in 3 years. So what are the days that I just read now? Sorry, I actually made a mistake. When it says in 3 years, the days are 1992, these are the number of days according to the sun, which is 364 times 3, that comes to 1992. And then in 5 years, 364 times 5, it's 1820. And then in 8 years, it's 364 times 8, it's 2912. So these are the days concerning the sun in 3 years, in 5 years, and in 8 years. 364 times 3 is 1092. 364 times 5, it's 1820. 364 days times 8, it is 2912 days in 8 years. But then if we look at the moon, because the moon is using 354, then you're going to have 354 times 3. So in 3 years, it's 1062. So you can see that with the moon, it's 1062 in 3 years. The days are 1062. But for the sun, it was 1092. So in 3 years, the moon has 30 days short compared to the sun. And then in 5 years, it has 50 days less, because it's 10 days less per year times 5, then it is 50 days in 5 years. For an addition being made to the 62 days, In 5 years, there are 1,770 days. Remember, according to the movement of the sun, or according to the days focusing on the sun, the days in 5 years, it was 1,820. But according to the moon, counting the days using the moon, then you come to 1,770, being 50 days less. And the days of the moon in 8 years are 2,832, whereas using the sun, in 8 years it was 2,912. And then with the moon you have 2,832. For its days in 8 years are less 80 days. So in 8 years, there is, in the moon, they are less compared to the sun, 80 days. Compare, and then in 5 years, the days of the moon are less 50 days, because it's 10 times 5, that one is 10 times 8. The year then becomes truly complete according to the stations of the moon and the stations of the sun. So now you see the reconciliation between the stations of the sun as well as the stations of the moon, which rises in the gates, which rise at in them for 30 days. Now, how then is this 30 days in 3 years? How do you reconcile it? That's when then we have the 13th month. Just excuse me a little bit. Baby, please reduce your volume.
You can hear it.
Yes. Okay. So the question that we're now looking at is then, how then do we reconcile the days, the 30 days short in 3 years? And you have probably seen and heard people talking about the 13th month, that a 13th month is added. I never understood how this 13th month came about until I had to read it from myself. And that's why I always say, we need to be like the believers of the scriptures of the Berean believers, that they did not only hear what was proclaimed or what was taught in the assemblies, they went back and they did the studying for themselves. They satisfied themselves. They read the scriptures for themselves. So now, having seen in the past that there's a 13th month, I didn't have a clue. I didn't understand how does it happen to have a 13th month? What informs the 13th month? When does the 13th month happen? Now, having done my own studying, I then understand how the 13th month happened. So the 13th month, which is basically 13th month, you're looking at a month that has 30 days. Now this 30 days is the 10, 10, 10. The shortage that you had in year 1, another one in year 2 gives us 20, another one in year 3 gives us 30. So it is basically after every 3 years that you can reconcile the difference that you have between the movement of the moon in terms of the days, as well as the movement of the sun. Now, that's then when you can, then the 13th month happens. It happens after every 3 years, as we've just read in the scriptures, that ENOCH chapter 74 from verse 13 to 16, that they may be changed with correct precision in 364. In 3 years, the days are 1,092, when it was explaining that. So that's when you can then do the reconciliation after every 3 years. So adding a 13th month happens. So then the question then becomes, okay, fine, how am I supposed to know that, okay, you say that it's every 3 years, but how am I supposed to know that when must I add the 13th years? Sorry, the 13th month, the 13th month. A 13th month is then added when the beginning of the new moon happens earlier than the beginning of the new year. Remember, I said earlier on when I was starting, I said that it doesn't necessarily mean that the beginning of the new moon or the beginning of the new month automatically means the beginning of the new year. I started by saying that according to the Gregorian calendar, when it is the new year, which is January, the beginning of the month is exactly the same time as the beginning of the year. So that happens like that according to the Gregorian calendar. Every time when people say Happy New Year, they say it's a new year, it's a new month of the year, but not necessarily according to YaHUaH's calendar. Other months, they do align. Sorry, other years rather. Other years, there is an alignment between the beginning of the months, or the beginning of the months, or the beginning of the moons, and the beginning of the year. That would be an alignment. But it does happen that the beginning of the months or the beginning of the new moons happen before, a month before the beginning of the new year. When then that happens, when it happens that the beginning of the new months happened a month before the beginning of the year, that's when the 13th month is added. So a practical example happened in this year 2025. In the year 2025, we had month 12 on the 23rd of August. So the end of the month, which would have started in July, the month 12 ended on the 23rd of August. So when the month ended on the 23rd of August, but the spring equinox is only going to happen on the 23rd of September. Now you see the gap. You see you see a month discrepancy between the beginning of the year, which is marked by the sun, which is marked by spring equinox, which is going to take place on the 23rd of September. Remember when we were in the previous teaching, we read that spring equinox in the southern hemisphere happens around either the 22nd of September or the 23rd of September. So in this year, when you go and Google it, it shows that the spring equinox will be on the 22nd of September. Like I said, they even admit it's not exact date, but it can either be the 22nd or the 23rd. And then that being the 23rd of September. But according to the moons, as we're marking moon 1 or month 1, month 2, month 3, the 12th month ended on the 22nd of August. So now, if then the 12th month ended on the 22nd of August, whereas if you check, they say that the spring equinox will be on the 22nd of September, there's a month difference there. That's when then the 13th month is added. You can just pause where I'm at right now and just maybe replay it again. The 13th month is added when the counting of the moons, as in when the 12th month finishes. The 12th month finishes before the spring equinox. An example for in the southern hemisphere in 2025, when you go on Google, it's going to say that spring equinox is going to happen on the 22nd of September. As I said, it said either 22nd or 23rd. It's not exact date, but it says on the 22nd of September. Now, if spring equinox is going to happen on the 22nd of September, but the month, the 12th month, finish on the 22nd of August in the southern hemisphere, or on the 23rd of August, thereabout. So there was a 30-day gap, whether using 22nd August and 22nd September, or whether using 23rd August or 23rd September, it's around those days. That gap that happens, that's when we know that's when we got to add the 13th month, because that 13th month will then be adding the 30-day short that you've had between the moon and the sun, which is 10 days per year. So 10, 20, 30. 30 days is then added. So in this year 2025, in the southern hemisphere, that's why then a 13th month was added. Now, again, talking about the difference between the southern hemisphere as well as the northern hemisphere. We in the southern hemisphere are adding the 13th month, as I've just explained, the difference between the 22nd of August and the 22nd of September. Or if you were going with the 23rd date, the 23rd of August and the 23rd of September. Hence, we're adding the 13th month. But this is done in the month of September. But if we look at the northern hemisphere, so the northern hemisphere, they actually added the 13th month in 2024. They added the 13th month actually on the 9th of April 2024. So already you see the difference between when we're adding the 13th month, we in the southern hemisphere, we're adding the 13th month in 2025. But those in the northern hemisphere, they added the 13th month last year, which was 2024. Already you see the gap, the difference in terms of the timing. Hence, it matters where you are, because you cannot be following the calendar of the northern hemisphere when you're in the southern hemisphere. As I said, even the seasons are different and so forth. And again, this 13th month was added on the 9th of April 2024. Why? Because the barley is Abib around March, April in the northern hemisphere. So the beginning of the new moons or the beginning of the new months happened in March, April in the northern hemisphere. And then with us in the southern hemisphere, barley becomes Abib, becomes ripe for harvest, ready for harvest around September, October. Hence, then the spring equinox for us is in September 22 or 23 thereabout, whereas the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere was in March, April. Hence, they had to reconcile the spring equinox with the meaning the beginning of the year as marked by the sun. They had to reconcile that with the beginning of the new moons or the beginning of the new months around March, April, because their spring in the northern hemisphere, it is around March, April. That difference matters and it means a lot, and that's why it's important to know where the true land is, because what is happening in the, because what is termed, what is known as Israel, which is in the Middle East, that's in the northern hemisphere. And that's why people are having Passover around March, April, because barley is Abib in what is known, or what we are told that it is Israel, which is in the northern hemisphere around March, April. But knowing that going back to Revelation chapter 2 verse 9 and Revelation 3 verse 9, and so many evidence that is provided not only in this book that says the true Yasharal, the land and the people. As I said, I'm not the only person that had this revelation. I actually even had to acknowledge other writers and other brothers and sisters as part of the preface and acknowledgement sort of tributes in this book, who have gone before me and got this revelation and knowledge before me. But as I said, the key question and the challenge is to those that now know that that place in the Middle East, which is called Israel, is really not Israel, that the true Yasharal is in the southern hemisphere. What then are you doing with that information? Are you still following the appointed times of YaHUaH according to the seasons in the northern hemisphere, or you have now changed to obey YaHUaH's appointed times according to the true land of Yasharal, the promised land of Yasharal? And now, as we are about to close, I just want to I constantly say it is for our protection. When YaHUaH said, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. Let's look at a pattern where there's something that happens after every 3 years, because we are seeing this reconciliation happening after every 3 years. Between the days of the moon and the days of the sun, between the spring equinox as well as the movement of the moon. Where else do we see this 3-year as far as the harvesting is concerned? Because remember, the moon, the beginning of the new moons was marked by barley being Abib, or ready for harvest, which speaks to the crops. Dabarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 28, it reads, and at the end of every 3rd year you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year and store it up within your gate. So YaHUaH gave us this, even we see this pattern of the tithe being brought before YaHUaH after every 3 years, because in this 3, that's when the reconciliation also happens. So that's when everything in terms of the days of according to the moon as well as according to the sun are in alignment. Hence we then bring our tithes after every 3rd year. A 13th month is added after 3 years to address the 10 days short per year, totaling 30 days in 3 years. Note that, as I've said again, the difference between the northern hemisphere as well as the southern hemisphere. And if we look at the us being in the southern hemisphere, according to the beginning of the new moons, because there are tools that you can access, software that you can access that can be able to tell us even for up to the next 5 years when will be the sliver moon or the beginning of the new moon happen. It actually shows that in next day it will happen on the 23rd of September, which then means that the sliver moon or the marking of the moon will happen at exactly the same time as spring equinox. So hence there will not be any reconciliation between the two, because they will all happen on the 23rd of September 2026. And then if we then look at counting then the 3 years, then according to the northern hemisphere, they will be adding Bona, the 13th month we in the southern hemisphere will be adding the 13th month in 2028, which will be 3 years from now. That's when then there will be misalignment, and that's when we'll know how to then add the 13th month. Whereas in the northern hemisphere, they will be adding the 13th month in 2027, because they had added their 13th month in 2024. So 3 years from 2024 will be 2027 in the northern hemisphere. We in the southern hemisphere will be adding the 13th month in 2028. That's what then that then concludes the discussion for today, which was aimed to address the difference between the beginning of the new moons as well as the beginning of the year. What happens when there's misalignment between the beginning of the year and beginning of the new moon? A 13th month is added, and that happens approximately after every 3 years, and that the moon marks the appointed time, or CHaNuK. Let me just read it again. What does it say? CHaNuK or Ecclesiasticus 43 verse 6 to 8, it says, for a declaration of terms, it says the moon serves as for a declaration of terms. So for the appointed times, YaHUaH instructed us to use the moon. created the moon. Amongst other functions of the moon, it is also for us to know the appointed times of YaHUaH as well as his feast, whereas the sun, he uses it amongst other functions, obviously, of the sun, like bringing light, bringing warmth. He also uses this to mark the beginning of the year. And then when there's that a variance in terms of the moon having 354 days, the sun having 364 days, the reconciliation is done after every 3 years by adding a 13th month. And so for us, it was important that I go through this particular teaching, that as we are looking forward to the beginning of the new moons, which is now aligned after adding the 13th month, which is now aligned with the beginning of the new year. And then that this particular teaching is provided prior for understanding why the 13th month was added. And then going forward, then most of the teachings that we're going to be looking at will be more of the reminder as to, now that we understand the timing as to the when, according to the southern hemisphere, according to the promised land, and then comparing it with the Gregorian calendar. So the focus then going forward as we start this appointed times of YaHUaH, being the first one being the Pasach or Passover on the 14th day of the first month, which will be followed by the Feast of Matzah or unleavened bread, which will start on the 15th day, and then we'll run for 7 days leading, and then when all the counting happened, we'll then just have a refresher, because I provided that teaching before on what are we to do according to the appointed times. But I trust YaHUaH that he will provide us more revelation, more understanding, and as such I'll also come through, and then whatever it is added, I'll then present to you, brothers and sisters. With that being said, shalom, and have a barak week.